Before we start, like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel with a super thanks or by joining. In the fall of 2019, a routine search and rescue operation was launched in Olympic National Park in Washington State. Ranger Elias Moore, a 22-year veteran of park services, had not reported in for 3 consecutive days. His last radio communication indicated unusual activity in Sector 7 near the Bogachiel drainage, one of the most remote and densely forested areas in the United States. A 5-person military team was dispatched from Joint Base Lewis McChord to locate and rescue Moore. The team was led by Lieutenant Cole Harper, an experienced officer who had been on numerous missions. Entering the Hoh Rain Forest on October 14th, the team expected a simple rescue mission. They did not find what they expected. What follows is Lieutenant Harper's account of what happened during those 72 hours in the oldest temperate rainforest in North America. Some details have been withheld at the request of military officials. The official report lists 1 soldier as killed in action by wildlife, 1 ranger deceased from natural causes, and the mission as completed. The unofficial truth is something else entirely. The Hoh Rain Forest covers over 100 square miles of primeval wilderness. Annual rainfall exceeds 140 inches. Some trees have stood for over 1,000 years. The forest floor receives less than 3% of available sunlight. Entire valleys have never been fully mapped. Every year, hikers enter these woods and are never seen again. The Park Service attributes these disappearances to accidents, exposure, and the unforgiving terrain. Lieutenant Harper has a different explanation. This is his story. My name's Harper, Lieutenant Cole Harper. I was a soldier then, leading a 5-man search team into the Olympic National Park in the fall of 2019. We were sent to find a ranger who'd gone missing 3 days prior. Simple recovery op, they said. Walk in, find him, or find what's left, walk out. But there was something in that forest. Something that didn't want us there. Something that watched from the moss and the mist and moved when we moved and stopped when we stopped. We found more than a missing man in those woods. We found out why some people never come back. The briefing room at Joint Base Lewis McChord smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Captain Torres stood at the front, tapping a laser pointer against a topographic map that looked like someone had crumpled green paper and tried to flatten it back out. The Hoh Rain Forest. I'd heard of it. Wettest place in the continental United States. 300 inches of rain a year in some spots. Trees so big and old they made you feel like an insect crawling through grass. Ranger Elias Moore, Torres said, clicking to a photo of a man in his mid-40s with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too many trails. 22 years with the Park Service. Knows this forest better than anyone alive. 3 days ago, he radioed in from Sector 7, said he was investigating unusual activity near the Bogachiel drainage. That was his last transmission. I looked at my team. Sergeant Ramirez sat still as stone, dark eyes fixed on the map like he was already walking the terrain in his head. Corporal Miller had his tablet out, probably pulling satellite imagery and weather data. Private Dawson, the youngest, chewed his thumbnail and tried not to look nervous. And Whitlock. Private Whitlock leaned back in his chair with that half smile he always wore, the one that said he thought every mission was a vacation with better equipment. "What kind of unusual activity?" Ramirez asked. His voice was quiet. It always was. Torres hesitated. Just a hair. Just enough for me to notice. Unspecified. Moore mentioned tracks he couldn't identify, large ones, and sounds at night he said didn't match any known wildlife. "Bears," Whitlock said. "Cougars. Guy probably got turned around and broke an ankle." Torres didn't smile. "Maybe, but the Park Service wants him found, and they want military assistance because the terrain is extreme and the weather window is closing. You've got 72 hours before a major storm system moves in. After that, extraction becomes problematic." Problematic. Military word for you might die out there, and we'll have to wait a week to get your body. I stood up. We'll bring him back, sir. Torres nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. That should have been my first warning. We flew in by helicopter, a Black Hawk that shuddered in the crosswinds coming off the Pacific. The forest below looked like green wool stretched over bones. The Hoh River cut through it like a gray vein, swollen with rain. The pilot set us down in a clearing near the ranger station at the forest's edge, and the moment the rotors stopped, the silence hit me. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that feels like pressure against your ears. The rain started before we finished unloading. Not heavy, just steady. The kind that soaks through everything eventually and never really stops. The trees rose around us like columns in a cathedral built by something that didn't worship anything human. Sitka spruces, some of them 300 feet tall, draped in moss that hung like old curtains. The ground was soft, spongy, covered in ferns that came up to your waist. Everything dripped. Everything smelled like wet earth and decay and something green that had been growing since before your grandfather's grandfather was born. GPS check, I said. Miller pulled out the handheld unit and frowned. Signal's weak, sir. Canopy's too dense. We'll have to rely on compass and terrain features once we get deep. Radios? Short range should work. Long range is going to be spotty. He looked up at the canopy, at the green ceiling that blocked out the sky. Real spotty. I nodded. I'd expected that. The forest didn't want to let signals in or out. It wanted to keep things to itself. Ranger Station gave us Moore's last known coordinates and a copy of his field notes from the days before he vanished. The notes were careful, methodical, weather observations, wildlife sightings, trail conditions. Then, on the last page, something different. Day 47 found tracks near confluence of Bogachiel and Unnamed Creek. Prints approximately 18 inches long, 8 inches wide. Bipedal. Stride approximately 5 feet. Not bear, not human, not anything I know. Followed for 200 meters before tracks entered creek and disappeared. Heard vocalizations at 0300, 0315, and 0340. Low frequency. Felt in chest more than heard. We'll investigate further tomorrow. There was no tomorrow entry. Just blank pages after that. Whitlock read over my shoulder and snorted. Bigfoot. Guy was chasing Bigfoot. He was chasing something, Dawson said quietly. His eyes hadn't left the tree line since we'd landed. Something with 18-inch feet. Focus, I said. We're here to find more, not to prove or disprove anything. We move in standard formation. Ramirez on point, then me, Miller, Dawson, Whitlock on rear, 5-meter spread. Radio checks every 30 minutes. We make the last known coordinates by nightfall and set camp. Questions? None. Good soldiers. They knew when to talk and when to walk. We entered the forest. The first thing you notice about the Hoh is that it swallows you, not just your body, your sense of scale, your sense of time. The trees are so massive and so close together that after 10 minutes, you can't tell if you've walked 100 meters or a mile. The moss muffles everything, your footsteps, your breathing, your heartbeat. The ferns brush against your legs like fingers, and the rain taps on leaves somewhere far above and reaches you as a fine mist that coats everything in wet. Ramirez moved like water through rocks. He'd grown up tracking deer in New Mexico, and he read the forest floor the way other men read newspapers. He paused every few minutes, crouched, studied the ground, then moved on without a word. I watched his back and trusted his instincts. They were better than mine. 2 hours in, he stopped, held up a fist. We froze. The forest dripped. Something creaked high above, branch against branch, or maybe something else. Ramirez pointed at the ground. I moved up beside him and looked. A footprint, clear in the soft earth beside a rotting log, bigger than my boot by half, human-shaped, but wrong. The toes were too long, too spread. The heel was deep, like whatever made it carried serious weight. And the stride. I could see the next print, 4 feet ahead. 4 feet. I'm tall, and my stride is maybe 3. "Bear?" Whitlock asked from behind. His voice had lost some of its swagger. "No," Ramirez said. "Bear's got claws. This is flat, and bears don't walk on 2 legs for long." He touched the edge of the print. "Fresh, maybe 6 hours." Miller crouched beside us and pulled out a measuring tape. 17 inches, close to what Moore reported. "Heading?" I asked. Ramirez looked at the trees. "Same direction we're going, toward the drainage." We kept moving. The tracks appeared and disappeared. Sometimes we'd find them clear as day in the mud. Sometimes they'd vanish into rock or root systems, and we'd have to search in widening circles until Ramirez picked them up again. They were heading deeper into the forest, away from any trail, away from any place a ranger would normally go. By late afternoon, the light was failing, not because of the hour, but because the canopy got thicker and the mist got denser. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 meters. The forest closed in. We found Moore's camp. It wasn't much. A small tent, green, nearly invisible against the undergrowth. His pack sat beside it, still buckled. His water bottle lay on its side near the fire ring, half full. His compass was on a log, needle pointing north, like he'd set it down and never picked it back up. "No sign of struggle," Ramirez said. He circled the camp slow, reading the ground. "He walked out that way." He pointed east. 1 set of tracks, normal stride, not running, not limping. "Like he just went for a walk and didn't come back," Dawson said. The tent flap was open. Inside, a sleeping bag lay half unzipped. His rifle leaned against the tent pole, loaded, safety on. "What kind of man leaves his rifle?" Whitlock asked. The question hung in the wet air like mist. I picked up Moore's field notebook from inside the tent. Same careful handwriting, same methodical observations. But on the last written page, something different. A sketch. Crude, hurried. A shape. Tall, broad, no neck to speak of, arms that hung past the knees, and eyes, just 2 circles. Somehow, even in that simple sketch, they looked like they were watching. Below the sketch, 1 word: close. "We're camping here," I said. "Miller, try to raise base. Ramirez, set a perimeter. Dawson, Whitlock, gather firewood. We maintain noise discipline after dark." They moved. Good soldiers. But I could see it in the way they kept glancing at the trees, the way their hands stayed close to their weapons. The forest was doing something to all of us, making us feel watched. Miller tried the long-range radio for 20 minutes. Nothing but static and a strange pulsing interference that sounded almost like breathing. He shook his head and switched to the short range. At least that still worked. We built a fire as darkness came down like a blanket. The flames helped. Not much, but some. The light pushed back the mist a few feet and made a small circle of orange in all that green-gray dark. We ate MRES and didn't talk much. The forest talked for us. Drips, creaks, the occasional rustle of something small moving through the ferns. Normal sounds. Except they weren't, because underneath them, in the spaces between, there was something else. At 2,200, Dawson froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Did you hear that?" We listened. Nothing. Then, far off, a knock. Wood on wood. Dull. Heavy. Like someone hitting a tree trunk with a baseball bat. Once. Twice. Then silence. "Branch falling," Whitlock said, but he'd gone pale in the firelight. "Branches don't fall twice," Ramirez said. We waited. The fire crackled. The mist pressed in, then from a different direction another knock. 1, 2, a pause, then 3. Quick. It was answering. "Miller," I said quietly. "Thermal." He pulled out the thermal imaging camera, military grade, the kind that can pick up a body heat signature through light cover at 200 meters. He scanned the trees slowly, panning left to right. Nothing on the east side. Nothing north. Wait. He stopped. The camera pointed southwest into the deepest part of the forest, where the trees grew so thick they looked like a wall. I've got something. We gathered behind him. The screen showed the familiar green of ambient temperature, the warmer yellows and oranges of the fire behind us, the white-hot shapes of our own bodies. And out there, maybe 150 meters away, partially obscured by tree trunks, a shape. Tall, vertical, a heat signature that burned white in the center and faded to orange at the edges. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, facing us. "What the hell is that?" Whitlock whispered. The shape shifted, not walking, just moving. Like it was repositioning to see us better. The thermal camera tracked it for 3 more seconds. Then it was gone. Not walked away, just gone. Like it stepped behind a tree and the tree swallowed it whole. Miller lowered the camera. His hands were shaking. "That wasn't a bear." "No," I said. My voice sounded far away. "It wasn't." The knock came again, closer now. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And for the first time since I put on the uniform, I felt like prey. We didn't sleep. Not really. We set a rotating watch, 2 men awake at all times, but every rustle, every drip, every creak brought everyone up with hands on weapons. The fire burned low, and we fed it steadily, keeping the light alive like it was the only thing between us and whatever stood out there in the dark. I've been in combat zones. I've sat in foxholes with mortars dropping 50 meters away. I've heard bullets snap past my head, close enough to feel the air move. None of that prepared me for the fear that crawled into my gut that night. Combat fear is sharp. It comes and goes. This was different. This was slow. This was patient. This was the kind of fear that seeps into your bones and makes a home there. Moore's tent sat empty beside ours. His sleeping bag still held the shape of his body. His coffee cup sat by the cold fire ring with a ring of brown at the bottom. All the small evidence of a life that had been here and then wasn't. I kept looking at that tent like he might crawl back through the flap and tell us it was all a misunderstanding. He'd just gone for a walk. He'd lost track of time. He was fine. The tent stayed empty. Whitlock took first watch with me. He didn't joke, didn't smirk. He sat with his rifle across his knees and stared at the dark between the trees like he was trying to see through it by sheer force of will. Every few minutes he'd open his mouth like he was going to say something, then close it again. The words wouldn't come. Neither of us had words for what we'd seen on that thermal camera. At 23:30 we heard the first scream. Not human, not animal. Something in between. It came from the northeast, maybe 300 meters out, and it rose through the mist like a knife. High and then low, long and then short. A sound that had too many notes in it, too many layers, like multiple throats making noise at once. Dawson sat up so fast he nearly went into the fire. What the hell was that? No one answered. We all knew what it wasn't. It wasn't a cougar. It wasn't an elk. It wasn't any sound that belonged in any forest we'd ever walked through. The knocks continued through the night, sometimes from the west, sometimes from the north, sometimes so close I could have sworn something stood just beyond the ring of firelight, watching, waiting, testing our edges. At 1:30, a smell drifted through the camp. Wet animal, rot, something that had been dead and warm and alive all at once. It sat in my throat like a hand. Whitlock gagged and covered his nose. What is that? Musk, Ramirez said quietly. He hadn't moved from his position by the fire, rifle across his knees, eyes on the dark. Big animals have it. Bears, elk in rut. He paused. This is stronger. This is wrong, Dawson whispered. He sat with his back against a log, knees pulled up, making himself small. This whole thing is wrong, sir. I couldn't argue with him. Around 0200, something changed. The knock stopped. The forest, which had been full of small sounds and distant movements, went completely still. Even the rain seemed to pause. The fire popped once, loud in the silence, and all 5 of us flinched like we'd been shot at. Then the breathing started. Not ours. Something else. Deep, slow, rhythmic, coming from everywhere and nowhere. A sound that seemed to rise from the ground itself, or from the mist, or from inside our own heads. In and out. In and out. Like the forest had lungs and was using them. Dawson started praying. Quiet words, barely a whisper, but I could hear the fear in them. Miller kept the thermal camera up, scanning, finding nothing. Whitlock's hands shook so bad his rifle rattled against his knee. Ramirez sat still. His eyes moved slow across the dark, reading it the way he read the ground, looking for the pattern, the tell, the sign that would show him what we were dealing with. "It's close," he said finally. "Real close. Inside 50 meters. "Where?" I asked. "Everywhere." He looked at me. "It's circling, sir, testing the perimeter, looking for a gap." The breathing continued, in and out, and underneath it, so faint I almost missed it, footsteps. Not the crunch of leaves or the snap of twigs, just pressure, weight, something heavy moving through the ferns without disturbing them, like it knew exactly where to place each foot. At 0300, the forest went silent. Not quiet, silent. The constant drip of rain stopped. The distant rustle of animals vanished. Even the fire seemed to burn quieter, the flames shrinking like they were afraid to make noise. Miller's radio crackled. We all jumped. The sound was too loud in that dead air. "Base, this is Sierra Team. Do you copy?" Miller spoke into the handset. Nothing. Static. Then, underneath the static, something else. A low sound. Not words. Not quite. A rumble that rose and fell like breathing, like something huge drawing air in and pushing it out through a chest as wide as a door. Miller dropped the radio like it had burned him. The sound continued for 3 seconds. 4. Then it stopped, and the static returned, and the forest started breathing again with its small sounds and constant drips. "What was that?" Whitlock's voice cracked. The swagger was gone now. The bravado. He was a kid in the dark with a gun that suddenly felt very small. I picked up the radio, tried base again, static. Tried the emergency frequency, static with that same strange pulse underneath, like a heartbeat recorded from inside a whale. "We're being jammed," Miller said. His face was pale in the firelight. "Or something's interfering with the signal. I've never seen readings like this." The GPS beeped. We all looked at it. The screen showed our position drifting, sliding east when we hadn't moved, then snapping back, then drifting again. Like something was playing with the satellites. Like the forest was telling them lies. I made a decision. At first light, we search a 1-kilometer radius for more. If we don't find him, we extract. This mission is compromised. No one argued. First light came gray and wet through the canopy. The mist had thickened overnight, visibility down to 30 meters. We moved out in a tight formation, spacing halved, weapons ready. Ramirez led us east, following Moore's tracks from camp. The prince led through fern fields and over fallen logs, around root systems, and down a small ravine where water trickled black over stones. Moore had walked like a man in a dream, his stride even, his direction straight, not wandering, not lost, going somewhere, being led. We found his ranger badge after an hour. It lay in the mud beside a massive cedar, the kind of tree that takes 5 men to circle with their arms. The badge was clean, no blood, no damage. Just sitting there, like someone had placed it carefully for us to find. Why would he drop this? Dawson picked it up and turned it over. The metal was cold, wet. Ramirez crouched by the cedar and pointed at the bark. Scratches, long ones running from about 3 feet off the ground to well over 8 feet. The wood underneath was pale and fresh. "Something sharpened its claws here," he said, "or marked its territory. Or wanted us to see it could reach that high," I said. We kept moving. The ravine deepened. The walls rose on either side, covered in moss and ferns that hung like curtains. The air got colder, damper. Sound got strange, echoing in ways that made it hard to tell where anything was coming from. At 900, we found what was left of Moore's camp jacket. It hung from a branch 20 feet up, torn, one sleeve missing. The fabric was stained with something dark that could have been mud or could have been blood. "How did that get up there?" Whitlock stared at the jacket like it might come alive. No one answered. We all knew. Something had thrown it. Something had climbed. Something wanted us to know what it could do. I should have called the retreat then. I know that now. But soldiers don't retreat from shadows. We needed proof. We needed something to bring back that would explain what happened to Moore and justify walking out of that forest without him. "We push another 500 meters, I said. Then we turn back. We pushed. The ravine opened into a small clearing where the canopy thinned and gray light filtered down like rain. The ground was soft here, churned, covered in tracks. Big ones, dozens of them, circling, overlapping like something had paced this spot for hours, days, like this was a place it returned to. The smell hit us all at once, that musk, that rot, so strong it made my eyes water and my stomach turn. Whitlock dry-heaved. Dawson covered his mouth with his sleeve. Even Ramirez, stone-faced Ramirez, grimaced and breathed through his teeth. In the center of the clearing, we found Moore. He sat against a fallen log, legs extended, hands in his lap. His eyes were open. His face was peaceful, almost serene. No visible wounds, no blood. Just a man sitting in the forest, like he'd decided to take a rest and never got up. Miller checked for a pulse, shook his head. "No marks," he said. "No trauma I can see. It's like he just stopped." Ramirez circled the body slowly, reading the ground. "He walked here on his own, sat down, didn't try to leave." He looked up at me. "Something kept him here, sir, or someone." Dawson was praying under his breath. I could hear the words, soft and fast, the kind of prayer you say when you're not sure anyone's listening, but you need to say it anyway. We photographed the scene. We collected Moore's notebook, his wallet, his wedding ring. We couldn't carry the body out, not through this terrain, not with the storm coming. We marked the coordinates as best we could and prepared to move. That's when Whitlock disappeared. It happened fast, faster than anything I've ever seen. One moment he was at the edge of the clearing, rifle up, watching our six. I remember looking at him, seeing his profile against the gray-green of the ferns, seeing his breath make small clouds in the cold air. The next moment, the ferns where he stood exploded outward, not rustled. Exploded. Like something massive had come through them at full speed. There was a sound, a thud, meat hitting meat, and then a crack, sharp and final, like a branch breaking or a bone giving way. Then silence. No scream, no shot, no cry for help, just that thud and that crack, and then nothing at all. "Whitlock!" I swept my rifle toward the ferns. Nothing. Green and gray and mist and nothing. "Whitlock!" Ramirez was already moving, pushing through the ferns to the spot where Whitlock had stood. He froze. Looked down. Looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Fear. I moved up beside him. The ground where Whitlock had been standing was torn up, gouged, like something massive had landed on it from above. Deep furrows in the mud, ferns crushed flat. His rifle lay in the dirt, still gripped by a hand. Just the hand. The arm ended in a ragged tear just past the wrist, bone white against red, tendons hanging like wet string. Dawson made a sound. High, thin, not quite a scream and not quite a sob. Miller grabbed him, held him back, kept him from seeing what we were seeing. Blood sprayed the ferns in a wide arc. It led away into the deeper forest, into the dark where the trees grew close and the mist pooled thick, and whatever had taken Whitlock waited. The spray pattern was wrong, too high, like Whitlock had been lifted off his feet before whatever happened. I stood there looking at that hand in the mud, and my mind went somewhere else, somewhere that tried to make sense of what I was seeing. A man doesn't lose his hand and stay quiet. A man screams. A man fights. A man makes noise. Whitlock had made no noise at all. Whatever took him had been so fast, so precise, so absolute, that he hadn't had time to understand what was happening before it was over. I thought about his mother. She lived in Ohio somewhere. He'd shown me a picture once. A small woman with gray hair and a smile that looked like his. She didn't know yet. She was probably making breakfast, or watching television, or doing whatever mothers do on ordinary mornings, while their sons die in forests that shouldn't exist. "Sir," Ramirez's voice pulled me back. "Sir, we need to move." I looked at him. His face was hard, controlled, but I could see the cracks, the places where the fear was trying to get through. "We have to go after him," Dawson said. His voice was breaking. "We can't just leave him. He might still be alive. He's gone," Ramirez said quietly. "Whatever took him is gone. It moved faster than anything I've ever tracked, sir. Faster than anything that big should be able to move. And it took him without making a sound, without leaving a trail we can follow." He gestured at the blood on the ferns. "That's all there is. That's all there's going to be." Dawson started to argue, but the words died in his throat. He looked at the hand, at the blood, at the silence that had swallowed everything Whitlock had ever been. I looked at the hand in the mud, at the blood, at the darkness between the trees where something breathed and waited and knew exactly where we were. "We extract," I said. "Now." We moved, not in formation, not with discipline. We moved like prey, stumbling through ferns and over logs, the forest pressing in from every side. Behind us, or beside us, or ahead of us, something moved. We heard it, branches cracking, footsteps too heavy to be human. That breathing sound, that rumble, rising and falling like a creature too big for its own lungs. Miller kept the thermal camera up as we ran. "Contact left, 70 meters. Contact right, 50 meters. It's circling us, sir. It's hurting us." "Where?" I gasped. "West. It's pushing us west, away from the extraction point." I stopped. The team stopped with me. We stood in a grove of cedars, ancient things, their bark shaggy with moss, their roots rising from the ground like the backs of sleeping animals. My lungs burned. My legs shook. But stopping felt worse than running. "We're not playing its game," I said. "We go north. We push through. Whatever happens, we stay together." Ramirez nodded. Miller adjusted the thermal. Dawson gripped his rifle so hard, his knuckles went white. We went north. The thing let us go 50 meters before it hit. It came from the left, from a shadow that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide anything. One moment there was forest. The next moment there was mass, movement, a shape that blotted out the gray light and brought that smell with it like a wave. I saw hair, long, dark, matted. I saw an arm, thick as a tree trunk, swinging. I saw Miller go down, the thermal camera flying from his hands, shattering against a root. I fired. The sound was huge in the dead air, echoing off the trees like thunder. Ramirez fired. Dawson fired. Muzzle flashes lit the mist, strobing the forest into frozen frames. A shape, an eye, a mouth opened wide, teeth that didn't belong in any primate. It roared, not a growl, not a bark, a roar that I felt in my chest and my gut and the base of my skull, a sound that said, "I am here and you are small, and this is my place." Then it was gone. Into the mist, into the trees, into the dark. Miller lay still. I dropped beside him, checked his pulse. Alive. Unconscious. A gash on his forehead where he'd hit the root, already swelling, but alive. "Get him up," I said. "Ramirez, take point. Dawson, help me carry him." We lifted Miller between us and moved. The forest watched. The thing watched. But it didn't come again. Not then. It had made its point. It could take us whenever it wanted. It was letting us know that everything after this was borrowed time. We found the river 2 hours later. The Hoh, swollen and gray, churning over rocks with a sound that swallowed everything else. The water was the color of old pewter, moving fast, carrying branches and foam, and the debris of a forest that never stopped shedding. Across it, maybe 60 meters, the forest thinned. Beyond that, the clearing where the helicopter had dropped us. Safety. Extraction. A world where things made sense and the biggest predators were men with guns. We stood at the tree line, Miller hanging between Dawson and me, semi-conscious and mumbling words that didn't connect. The river roared. The mist hung low over the water like steam from a pot. And between us and the river, standing at the water's edge, it waited. I'll never forget what it looked like in that gray light. 8 feet tall, maybe 9, shoulders as wide as a doorframe, covered in hair that was black and brown and gray all at once, matted with rain and mud and things I didn't want to think about. The head sat forward on almost no neck, a massive skull with a brow that jutted out over eyes that were too human, too knowing, too old. The proportions were wrong. That's what my mind kept coming back to. The arms were too long, the legs too thick, the chest too deep. It was built for something that humans weren't built for. Strength that didn't need speed, power that didn't need weapons. A body that said, "I was here before you, and I'll be here after." It stood with its feet in the shallows, water running around its ankles like the river was afraid to touch it. Its arms hung at its sides, long, reaching almost to its knees, ending in hands that could have wrapped around my head and crushed it like an egg. It didn't move as we emerged from the trees. It just stood there, watching us with those eyes that had seen men before, many men, and would see many more after we were gone and forgotten. The smell reached us even over the river. That musk, that rot, stronger than before, like standing downwind of something dead and alive at the same time. My eyes watered. My throat closed up. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to hide, to be anywhere but here in the open with that thing looking at me. "Oh God," Dawson whispered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." The thing tilted its head, just slightly, like it was listening to his prayer, like it understood. I raised my rifle, sighted center mass. My finger found the trigger. The weight of the weapon felt like nothing, like holding a toy against something that didn't care about toys. "Don't," Ramirez said quietly. "It's letting us see it. It's never done that before. If we shoot, it ends. All of us." I didn't lower the rifle, but I didn't fire. The thing breathed, that rumble, that sound I'd heard on the radio and through the trees and in my nightmares for months afterward. It breathed and looked at us, and something passed across its face that might have been amusement, or might have been pity, or might have been nothing a human could name. We stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. The river churned. The mist drifted. The gray light held everything in a kind of stasis, a frozen moment, where the world waited to see what would happen next. The thing moved first. It took a step forward. Just one. The water splashed around its leg. I heard Dawson's breath catch. I heard Ramirez's finger tighten on his trigger guard. I felt my own heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out, like it knew something my head hadn't figured out yet. The thing stopped. It looked at each of us in turn. Me, Ramirez, Dawson, Miller, unconscious between us. It looked at us the way you look It's something small and harmless that has wandered into your territory, not with anger, not with hunger, with a kind of tired patience that said it had seen this before and would see it again, and we were nothing special. Then it did something I still can't explain. It raised one hand, slowly, palm out, fingers spread, and it held it there, in the gray light, in the mist, in the space between us and the river. A gesture, a signal, a warning or a farewell or something I don't have words for. Then it turned, slowly, deliberately. It walked into the river, the water parting around its legs like it was afraid to touch it. It walked until the water reached its chest. Then it dove. Gone. The river closed over it and kept churning, and there was nothing to show it had ever been there at all. We crossed upstream where the water was shallower. We carried Miller between us. We didn't speak. We didn't look back. We walked until we reached the clearing, and the radio finally crackled to life, and the helicopter came down through the rain like a miracle. The pilot's face when he saw us, I'll never forget that either. The way his eyes went wide. The way his mouth opened like he was going to ask something and then closed again when he saw our faces. We must have looked like ghosts, like men who had walked through something that wasn't supposed to exist and come out the other side changed in ways that didn't show on the surface. He didn't ask what happened. He just flew. The forest fell away below us, green and endless, swallowed by mist and rain. I watched it shrink through the window, and I felt something I didn't expect to feel. Not relief, not gratitude, something like loss, like leaving behind a piece of myself that I'd never get back. A piece that was still down there, in the green, in the dark, in the space between the trees where something old still walked and waited and watched for the next men who thought they could come into its home and leave unchanged. They debriefed us separately. Different rooms, different officers, the same questions asked 6 different ways. What did you see? What did you hear? What happened to Private Whitlock? I told them a large, unidentified animal, possibly a bear, attacked our team. Whitlock was killed. Moore was found deceased, cause unknown. They wrote it down. They nodded. They didn't believe me, but they didn't have anything better to put in the report. Bear attack. Wildlife incident. Case closed. Miller woke up 2 days later with no memory of the attack. The doctors said that was normal. Traumatic brain injury. The mind protects itself. Sometimes I envy him. Sometimes I think the forgetting is a gift. Dawson left the service 3 months later. Medical discharge. They called it anxiety disorder. I called him once, a year after. He didn't pick up. His mother told me he'd moved somewhere warm, somewhere without forests, somewhere he could see the horizon in every direction. She said he had trouble sleeping. She said he woke up screaming sometimes, words she couldn't understand, names she didn't recognize. I understood. I have the same dreams. Ramirez stayed in. He's a master sergeant now, training new scouts at Fort Benning. We don't talk about the Hoh. We don't talk about what we saw. But every year, on the anniversary, he sends me a text. Same 2 words every time. Still here. I answer the same way. Still here. It's our way of saying we made it. Our way of acknowledging that something happened in that forest that changed us both in ways we can't explain and don't want to. They never recovered Whitlock's body. The official report says he was killed by a bear and the remains were scattered by wildlife before a recovery team could reach the site. The recovery team, 6 men with rifles and dogs, found nothing. No blood, no bones, no sign that anyone had ever been in that clearing except the footprints we'd left behind. One of the handlers told me later, off the record, that his dog wouldn't enter the ravine. The animal had tracked fugitives through swamps, found bodies in collapsed buildings, worked disaster zones without flinching. But it sat at the edge of that ravine and whined and refused to move. And when the handler pushed it, it snapped at him. First time in 8 years. Something in there the dog knew better than to mess with, the handler said. He wasn't smiling. Moore's death was ruled natural causes. Heart failure. the autopsy said. His heart just stopped. No blockages, no defects, no explanation. A healthy man with a strong heart who walked into the forest and sat down and stopped living. Sometimes I think about his face. That peaceful expression, the way he sat there like he was waiting for something. Like he'd made a deal or kept an appointment or finally understood something that the rest of us couldn't see. I don't know what killed him. I don't know if that thing in the forest killed him, or if the forest itself killed him, or if his heart just gave out from seeing something the human body wasn't designed to see. I don't know. And not knowing is the part that follows me. I went back once, 3 years later. Curiosity, guilt, the need to prove to myself that it had been real. The Hoh looked the same, green and wet and endless. The mist hung in the trees like breath. The rain fell steady and soft. I walked the trail to the ranger station and stood at the tree line and listened. The forest was quiet, normal quiet. Bird sounds and water sounds and the creak of old wood in the wind. Nothing watched me from the shadows. Nothing waited. I almost convinced myself it had all been in our heads. Stress, fear, the mind seeing things that weren't there because the forest was so big and so old and so far from anything human. Then I found the tree. It stood just off the main trail, a massive Sitka spruce with bark like armor. At chest height, carved into the wood, was a handprint. Huge. 5 fingers spread wide. The cuts were old, weathered, grown over with lichen, but they were clear. Someone or something had pressed a hand against that tree and dragged down, carving through bark and into wood, leaving a mark that would last longer than anyone who saw it. I put my hand in the print, just to see. My fingers didn't reach the first knuckle of the carved ones. My palm sat in the center like a child's hand in an adult's glove. I left after that. I walked back to my car and drove to Seattle and flew home to a city with concrete and lights and no trees taller than a 2-story building. I didn't go back. I won't go back. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the street outside is empty, I hear it. A knock. Wood on wood. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I don't go to the window. I don't look outside. I lie in bed and listen and wait for the sound to stop. It always does, eventually. But it takes longer each time, and the silence after feels less like an ending and more like a pause. People ask me if I believe in Bigfoot, in Sasquatch, in the wild man of the woods. I tell them I don't believe in anything I haven't seen with my own eyes. That usually ends the conversation. If they pushed, if they really wanted to know, I'd tell them something different. I'd tell them there are places in this world that don't belong to us. Old places, deep places. Places where the rules are different. And the things that live there have been living there since before we came down from our own trees and learned to walk upright. The Hoh Rain Forest is one of those places. Maybe the Olympic Peninsula. Maybe parts of the Cascades and the Rockies and the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest, where the timber grows thick and the trails disappear and men go in and don't come out. Something lives there. Something old. Something that was here before the rangers and the trails and the national parks. Something that will be here after we're gone and the forest takes back the roads and the buildings and the memory of everything we tried to build. If you find yourself in those woods, walk soft. Keep your eyes open. Don't go off trail. And if you hear a knock in the night, wood on wood, 1 and 2 and 3, don't answer. Some calls aren't meant to be returned. My name's Harper. I was a soldier. I led men into the green, and some of them didn't come back. I've carried that weight for 5 years now, and I'll carry it until I'm done carrying anything. Whitlock's mother called me once, 6 months after. She wanted to know what happened. She wanted to know if her son suffered. I told her it was quick. I told her he didn't feel anything. I told her he died doing his duty, serving his country, being the kind of soldier any mother would be proud of. I don't know if any of that was true. I hope it was. I hope whatever took him was fast enough that he never knew what was happening. I hope the last thing he felt was the cold morning air and the weight of his rifle and the presence of his brothers beside him. I hope. That's all I have now. Hope and memory and the sound of knocks in the night that might be real and might be my mind refusing to let go of something it can't understand. The forest keeps its own. If you're ever in the Hoh, if you ever stand at the edge of those ancient trees and feel that silence press against your ears and smell that mist that tastes like time itself, remember what I told you. Walk soft, stay on the trail, keep the fire bright, and don't knock back. That's all I've got. That's the truth of it. We went in looking for one missing man, and we found something else. Something that looked at us with eyes that had seen the first people walk into those woods and would see the last ones walk out. Something that took Whitlock without a sound and let the rest of us go because it wanted to. Because we weren't worth the trouble. Because the forest is patient, and we are not, and in the end, the green always wins. If this story stays with you, if you think about it late at night when the wind moves through trees you can't see, that's fine. It stays with me too. It's supposed to. Some things don't let go. Some things knock in the night and wait for an answer that should never come. More new. At the end, sitting in that clearing with his hands in his lap and his eyes on something we couldn't see, he knew. And maybe that knowing is what stopped his heart. Maybe that's what it does to you when you finally understand that you're not at the top of the food chain, that you never were, that the forest just let you think so because it was easier that way. Keep your fire bright. Stay together. And if the mist rolls in and the silence gets too loud and something moves in the trees that shouldn't be there, run. Run and don't look back. Because if you see it clear, if you look into those eyes and see what's looking back, you won't want to run anymore. You'll want to sit down. You'll want to wait. You'll want to understand. And then the forest will keep you too. So that's the end of our story. If you made it this far, thank you. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel, and it's completely free. If you want more encounters like this one, check out the videos on screen right now. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.